Just a little disclaimer. The video you're about to see is full of interruption. And I just always chuckle every time I get this comment. Unbelievably annoying how many times you stop this video to make commentary. This video will be much the same. So, buckle up, Nancy. Here we go.
There's no shortage of things that are incomprehensibly strange in the biblical library.
So being sick had nothing to do with
not much. No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, what did being sick do? Well, it made me more grateful. That's for sure.
But isn't that wrapped up with religion?
Well, that's partly why I'm bringing it up. You know, I mean, I was in excruciating pain for 3 years. And so now when I'm sitting here and I'm not on fire, I'm reasonably pleased about that when I have enough sense to remember.
Right.
You know, and so, is that a permanent change? I suspect so. 3 years is a long time.
I mean, it does sound like what God did to Job. I'm just saying, it's very...
Well, I think like that happens to everybody to some degree, you know? I mean, every single person in the course of their life has to deal with the fact that somewhat random, extremely unpleasant things come along, and to some degree, even independent of your moral conduct.
Oh, totally.
And then, well, just look, if you're a bad actor, the probability that horrible things are going to come your way is all things considered, quite radically increased. But
yes and no. I mean, nothing bad happened to Saddam Hussein until we captured his ass and hung him. But he had 65 years of being able to act like the most ridiculous tyrant in the world and get away with it. Other people, again, they don't do anything and something bad happens. Well, I feel like when people connect their behavior with some sort of punishment or reward, that's childish. That's when people go karma. I did a whole thing on this on my show once. What a bunch of bullshit, karma. Americans interpret karma to mean like, you took the last parking spot and now shit's gonna happen to you. That's Schadenfreude, that's not karma. But that's how people think of it, karma. Oh yeah, it's gonna come back and get you. No, I'm sorry.
Weaponized karma.
Weaponized karma, no. Life is random. Good people get punished for no reason, and bad people go unpunished. You just, you know, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're some sort of a petty criminals always committing crimes, you're probably going to wind up in jail, and that's not good. But not everything has a logical connection to it.
Well, and lots of times good people suffer terribly.
Terribly.
Right, and that's partly what Job is trying to deal with. And,
exactly.
You know, and part of what he does do is it's a strange thing because he takes refuge in his own ignorance, and I think there's some utility in that. There has to be, you know, because we have to, if we don't operate on the assumption that there's something like an intrinsic moral order, it's very difficult for us to conjure up the courage to continue to exist when things go seriously sideways.
Okay, so for those of you who are new to the channel, that real long run I just gave you, don't count on me doing that every time. And the main video has been watched hundreds of thousands of times. This video will just be a few thousand times. Go watch the whole video if you don't want to see me. This is where we're getting at the question of morality. Okay, what is morality? How does it work? So Tim DeRoche has been on the channel. He's in the corner. He follows the conversations quite closely. I started reading this when I was in the airport coming back from Olympia, coming back from the conference. He writes this: our public understanding of morality is in crisis. Indeed, even outside of school, we struggle to talk about morality at all. In a recent advice column in the New York Times, a reader asked whether it was okay for her adult daughter to bring her married lover on a family trip to Greece. Instead of telling the writer to keep this creep as far away from her family as possible, the New York Times expert advised her to be more tolerant. This is about respecting your adult daughter's choices. You have substituted your idea of happiness for hers. It is common and often well-intended trap for many parents. It is not productive, though. As a show of respect, read up on polyamory before you broach the subject with her. the man is cheating. And this is where these, oh shoot, I want it. This is where sort of our libertarian ethos that wants to create, well, if we all just have a, see, is it really kindness, or is it just avoiding conflict and deciding to let other people pay for things? The phrase "not productive" is doing a lot of work here. We often now use words such as unproductive or inappropriate or unhealthy to describe behaviors that we want to eliminate, either in ourselves or others. But those are borrowed concepts from one from economics, productivity, one from etiquette, appropriateness, and one from medicine, health. Economics, etiquette, and medicine are wonderful. I'm in favor of all these, but they are clumsy metaphors for morality. I fear that talking this way has led us astray. For the production of something to be good, to be for good or for ill, what's appropriate to be polite is not what is morally right, and a healthy body may be engaged in deeply immoral activities. I've been continuing to read the Greg Lowry memoir, and it's so interesting in that memoir. I should at least pull it up so you can see what I'm talking about. In some of the videos that he's talked about this, in fact, a video with his son, he talks about that this book is a book of confessions. And he is quite open about the sins of his youth. I'll just say that. 18 years old, got his 15-year-old girlfriend pregnant. They get married. She gets pregnant, or they intend to get married. They promise to get married. They really don't. She gets pregnant again. He scrounges up $200 for her to go get an abortion. She comes back with the money, doesn't go through with it, have a second child, finally marries the first woman, and they have an apartment, and he's working a job and going to college, and then he's looking at himself, he's looking at his mother, he's looking at his father, and he's trying to discern this moral world. And so then another woman at work catches his eye, and he begins to flirt with her. He doesn't tell her about the fact that he's married with 2 kids, starts having sex with her. She comes up pregnant, and then he's going to ghost her, but the law's not going to let him. So now suddenly he's on the hook for child support payments. Of course, his wife finds out about this, leads to more difficulty. And I'm not in anywhere near through the book. But again, confessions. And Glenn Lowry, I haven't gotten to the end of the book yet because I'm just reading through it, but you can see what he's putting up here. These are lessons learned, and he's living in a moral universe, and the various actors have different plays on morality. His mother basically tells him, whenever you get in a trap like this, you just deny. Just keep denying. He doesn't get that advice from his father. His father was his father, but not his sister's father. But his father always treated his sister like he was his own, because Glenn Lowry's mother cheated. And so you watch this, it's so fascinating, where on one hand, Bill Maher is on his show as a moralist. You know, there are all these moral standards, and there are all these eternal moral standards. And the problem with the Bible is that the Bible is inconsistent. But okay, last video I talked about science. Now we're talking about morality, and Maher basically says, well, randomness, that the world is just random. Everything is random. There's no consequence. Now, again, if Peterson would have pushed him on this, he would probably, well, okay, yeah, so maybe if you drink and smoke, and of course Bill Maher has talked about his past drug use, that there's going to be no consequence for this physically for him. Well, maybe not. Some people do it and they get away with it. Often people don't, but it's not like it's completely weightless. It's interesting how he attacks karma, because karma has become this very popular thing in the culture. But again, as with a lot of folk religious beliefs, it's just sort of out there. And part of the things that I really liked about this illustration that was in Tim's piece is that you put this forward, and very quickly people are going to sort of, they might all vote for the same person, or they might seem go along to get along. But you tell a story like this, and suddenly it's like, well, what about your daughter's boyfriend's wife? Are there no obligations towards her? And very quickly, you begin to see that there are, in fact, institutions. And for the institutions to be maintained, there's going to have to be public agreement, or at least public assumptions. There's going to have to be a universe in which there is moral weight. And you're going to have to figure this out together. I was on Mark Parker's live stream, and it should make my homeroom video. To keep my eye on the time. And I was going to make a video about Matthew Peugeot's video, and Matthew Peugeot is a very interesting character. I asked Jonathan to get in touch with him for me. This was a while ago, and I said, I'd love to do a Randos conversation with you, because most of the time I don't reach out, but Matthew's a very interesting and intriguing figure. And so basically I just like to hear him tell his own story a little bit more. And he has in some videos in the past. And he just nicely wrote me back and said, I don't really feel like doing too much YouTube. And then he was on Twitter for a while, and clearly he's been working on a book. I had this long drive to Palo Alto yesterday, and I listened to a bunch of this video on my drive, and it's fascinating. Interesting guy, and it takes a while. Just the manner that he speaks, it's just sort of around and around and around, but you have to listen for a while to kind of get a sense of him. His books are a lot clearer, and he said a number of things that I found really interesting. His portion about sleep and dreams. He started out talking about he was doing dream interpretation. I thought, well, that's interesting. Because dream interpretation is always something that has sort of mystified me. Jung and Freud. I remember the book I read from Jung. Lots of stuff about dreams, and it's like, how do you know? I'm such a modernist deep down in many respects. And so he's talking about a number of things, but the way I make my videos usually is that I listen to things and I watch things and I flit around, and some things sort of stick. And sometimes I know things stick because I watch something and then I go on to something else and I go on to something else, because I usually, a lot of people imagine, I'm just sitting here at a computer watching videos all day. The truth is that these videos enter my life episodically when I'm taking a little drive, or I'm doing the dishes, or I'm doing a chore, or something like that. And then I usually make my videos about something that sort of bubbles up from below and maybe makes a connection, or I figure, let whatever those processes are, let them do their work for me. And so I first sat with this video for about 10 or 15 minutes and thought, didn't find a way in, so then jumped back to the Maher video. But this sort of caught my attention.
Okay. And I think we've lost the ancient worldview. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. We've lost it. Okay. And it's many reasons for it, why we lost it. I don't necessarily want to go into it, but it's usually about we tried to integrate certain things that we couldn't, or that we shouldn't have, such as materialism. But there's other things that we tried to integrate, thinking that we could, and when I say we, I mean Christianity, the Christian civilization. We thought we could absorb certain things and then make them our members of us, like members of make them into things that follow the Christian principle, which is Christ, obviously. Um, Maybe at first it looked like it was working. Kind of like if you eat a poison fruit, you might not realize right away that you're sick. Gonna take a little time, maybe an hour later you'll start feeling weird. But for that hour there after you've eaten the poison fruit, maybe you think you know, you're on top of it. I just ate this poison fruit, no problem. I'm still okay, no worries. Then an hour later or 2 hours later, then whoops, why am I dizzy? Why am I hallucinating? Why am I falling asleep? Yeah, you see, it's all related. This is related to the subject in question, but yeah, because you ate something that you weren't supposed to, or you tried to integrate something into yourself that did not. Okay, now and then later you got sick, and then parts of your body were not serving Christ anymore, but were serving something else, and they were in your body, and you thought it was the body of Christ, but it wasn't. It was something else, serving something else. Like when you eat poison, you eat something toxic, you want to make it part of your body, but it rejects. It doesn't follow you what your mind tells it to do. It follows some other weird thing that you don't know necessarily what it is. Uh, and then you lose control of your body, you fall. Um, you get crazy. Yeah, your mind, you lose it, because when you
All right, you get the point. This is his manner of speaking, and it takes a while, and he sort of weaves it. It's interesting listening to him talk, thinking about, because of course Jonathan, I've watched a ton of Jonathan, and they're brothers, and so in some ways they're connected, but they're also different, and it's just, but I can see. I remember when Jonathan, sort of first popped up, he talked about the fact that he and his brother just talked about this stuff on and on and on, and you can see then sort of you can see the connection and the relationship between them. So much of understanding Matthew Pajot and Jonathan to a degree, really both of them, is trying to see the world in the way they see the world, and describing exactly how that is not terribly easy. But I liked this section about integration, because a lot of what our culture has been doing has been attempting to integrate different things. Now, part of it's interesting reading the Lowry book, because he's writing about, he's 18 in the 60s, and now he's a little older than I am, but I'm older than many of you, and I grew up in our church was very much in an African American community, so it's not an alien world that he writes of. And I remember how things have changed. And as I was reading this book, I was thinking about how things are different now. So the girl getting pregnant, would she have gotten pregnant now? I don't know. Maybe she would have been on birth control. Maybe they both would have, in sixth grade, had all of these lessons in school about birth control, and so maybe she wouldn't have gotten pregnant. If she had gotten pregnant after 1973, would she have had an abortion? Now, with the second baby, he tries to have her abort the baby, but she doesn't. And then you just go down the list, and what's interesting is that there have been all of these adaptations that have come into play. So let's say the first, neither baby happens because of contraception, or the two babies are aborted, and so then then suddenly other things in Glenn's life start going in different ways. Now, part of what makes Glenn's story really interesting and subtle is that he nicely gives us different characters. They were his girlfriend that he got pregnant with his first two children, then wife. Her parents were just up from the South, very religious, went to church, We're not going to condone this. Did a lot of hiding some of these things out of shame, but sort of kept them to a moral standard. His mother, who would sleep around, questions of, exactly what are the relationships with which she's having these men. And then he talks about she has a couple of brothers. And so he's got an uncle who is a womanizer. And so on one hand, he's sort of uncomfortable. And I read the portion yesterday. He's sort of uncomfortable about seeing his mother in the pool hall. Put this mic up a little bit. Maybe that'll help. Uncomfortable about that, but he very much wants to be a player like his uncle. But he's 18. And so you see as he's telling the story, as he's constructing this world, and a world that's not terribly foreign, the ramifications of all of this morality. And again, if there are ideals, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately are the power of ideals in communities. And these ideals are really so powerful. This is part of the reason that Jordan Peterson is so interested in the Bible, because these ideals shape a community and shape a society, and they have a powerful influence. So, for example, with Glenn Lowry, he wants to be a player because he sees these guys. And what being a player means that, okay, he does have a wife and he does have 2 girls at home. And on one hand, he is working hard to try and bring in enough money, but he's not really doing that very well. But at the same time, he wants to sleep with whoever he wants to sleep with. And he hopes to get away with it. And what's honest about the book is that it's not going to happen. Now, I was thinking this morning about Bill Maher, and I've listened to Bill Maher talk for years about Bill Maher, I would imagine, has basically operated under the new norm for a single man's wife. Is he going full Andrew Huberman? I don't know. Bill Maher, I haven't done any Googling, but he's never married. He commonly brags about not being married. He certainly brags about liking sex, and in fact, the advertising right before for hymns has all of this stuff about it, and clearly that's his audience. And so it's just fascinating how we do develop sort of these moral intuitions. And okay, but we're extremely selective about them. And what Peterson is basically arguing for is the reconstitution of a moral universe and a society that has a common one. And instead, we've had so much change. Let's go a little bit further.
It's worse than that because, and this is why I brought up the Cain story earlier. If you are tortured, even unjustly, and you lose faith in yourself and the structure of existence, it isn't only that you become demoralized, it's that you tilt towards malevolence. You start to work against things. And this is why, for example, I'm not thrilled in the least with the antinatalist types. They make this claim that existence is characterized by suffering that's so intense that it would be better if consciousness itself just ceased to exist. And you can make, that's Mephistopheles' case, by the way.
It's Silenus in Greek mythology.
Well, you can make a case for it.
What would be better to have never been born?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, and you might say, okay, fair enough. What you're doing essentially is saying that the suffering in existence invalidates its utility. But what if it is the case that if you believe that you become an agent that produces suffering? Well, that is what seems to happen, is that
right.
Like once you turn against life, I mean, look, everyone's going to have a time in their life when they think, oh my God, like really? Is this worth it? Like you watch someone you love suffer, or maybe you're in...
Now, again, I sort of split this up, but what Peterson has done here is basically come around the back and constructed, once again, a universe with moral gravity. And says, actually, we all assume this. Even our outrage for when, these bad things are happening to me, assumes moral gravity. If you really thought that, as Maher just said, that the universe is completely indifferent and there is no moral gravity, and then when bad things happen, you should just say, you know,
in agony for doing something good, let's say, in the worst possible situation. You think, really? Like, really? And so then maybe you get cynical and you get bitter. But the problem is that has a direction too. That is what happens to Cain. Like, he starts out cynical and bitter, but he ends up murderous. And his descendants are genocidal. Like, that doesn't seem like a good alternative. And so what you see in Job is this insistence, and it's a terrifying insistence, that you are required to maintain faith.
And I think if you watch Maher, you can sort of see when he's listening and when he's just sort of waiting.
In your essential goodness, despite your flaws, which is already a hard thing to do, and your faith in the fundamental benevolence of, what would you say, of the created order. Because anything else hurts you, but it's worse than that. It produces a kind of malevolence that spreads. And I think that's like...
Now, again, the fundamental benevolence of the created order. That is not Maher's position. He basically already said, well, it's there's nothing there. But if being is ultimately good, then you're going to have a moral structure.
You asked me what the relationship was between me being ill and this interest in religious belief. And I said that wasn't the primary mover. The primary mover for me has always been the study of atrocity. Because I spent a lot of time as a psychopathologist studying the actions of the people who have done the worst things. And they're unimaginably bad. I mean, Iris Chang's book, The Rape of Nanking. The Nazis are the good guys in that book.
Well,
right. I'm serious. That's how rough it was.
For those who may not remember, 1937, the Japanese are on the march.
Yeah.
And they're about to, Pearl Harbor was 1941, so this is 4 years before Pearl Harbor, and they were on the march in Asia, and they went into China, Manchuria, and what they did, I remember reading somebody's column recently, it was on the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it went into great detail about what the Japanese did, not just in Manchuria,
Iris
in
Chang
Nanking.
committed suicide after writing that book.
Boy, when it's so bad, even the book writer kills it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, this guy said, I know there's a lot of hand-wringing in America about Nagasaki and Hiroshima, not in Asia. They were not upset at all that the Japanese regime was taken out as brutally as it was, because what they did, I mean, to your point about the rape of Nanking, was just like, we won't like...
See, well, and that's also the conundrum at a relatively deep level that's being contended with in the Old Testament. It's like, so the Canaanites in general, like from a narrative perspective, the Canaanites are the evil descendants of Cain.
Right.
Okay, and so the people that are being fought against are the cynical, bitter, twisted, nihilistic, genocidally motivated, sadistic murderers, let's say. Well, then the question is, if that's the enemy that you're up against, what exactly is the moral thing to do? You know, and you just made a case, you know, painful it is to point it out, you made a case that there are patterns of behavior that are so despicable that what's justified in that situation? Was the atom bomb justified? Well, you know, we're arguing about that now. And people take the same tack with regards to the firebombing of Dresden, right? And you think, well, you know, the Nazis, they were pretty bad. And so what do we do about that? And the answer is, well, you know, we don't exactly know. It's not like it's simple. You know, how do you limit your reprisals? Well, we're dealing with that right now with the situation in Israel.
I just want to point out how skillfully Jordan has done this. And I think you can learn a lot from Jordan in this conversation. He was patient. He listened carefully. Maher made his arguments, and Jordan just kind of took his time and then came around and said, well, whether or not you have to make the judgment, you yourself have to make the judgment on the Canaanites, I would dare bet that none of us are in a position to do so, not knowing them personally. Now, people sort of make these connections. But he said, just in principle, it's not outrageous. In fact, you yourself would do it, that you can see that, well, there are cases in which really evil, and Bill Maher, despite the fact that everything happens randomly, he still has this concept of evil, that some evils have to be taken out. And Peterson is rather skillfully sort of, he didn't jump on Bill too much, but he just sort of waited and worked through, and now has sort of come around in the back and said, can you see? Can you see? And Maher, this is a good faith conversation. And again, the table is set for them to talk. They're friends. They like each other. They respect each other. They treat each other with respect. They're having a good conversation. And quite frankly, so much of this kind of thing depends on setting that table. Because if you don't set the table, you probably can't have the conversation. Maybe that's enough for now. Leave a comment. And I didn't interrupt nearly as much as I expected to. So for some of you out there, this might be a welcome change.